a father now, Dave.
Very nice.
Young Harry, as he started saying,
My next guest.
Always reinventing myself and stuff so that someday I can look out at that crowd and go, I'm 60 and sexy.
You think you know David Letterman? Think again. For 33 years, America's favorite gap-toothed host smiled his way into our hearts, but the cameras never showed what happened when the red light went off. Tonight, we're revealing the classified list Letterman himself compiled. 9 A-list celebrities whose behind-the-scenes behavior was so twisted, so genuinely evil, that even hardened TV veterans were left traumatized. From Madonna's drug-fueled rampage to the movie star who physically attacked Letterman on live TV, these shocking revelations will forever change how you see Hollywood's biggest names.
You know, I don't know if this means anything or if it means nothing, but last night I'm watching television, and there's something called the National Geographic Channel.
As singer Cher astutely observed during her memorable 1986 appearance, I see how you deal with your guests, and sometimes it's really great and you seem to like them, and then sometimes, if you don't like them, you might as well take a picnic lunch. She wasn't wrong. Letterman had developed a reputation for making his guests squirm, and while audiences loved the awkward tension, those in the entertainment industry began to whisper about which stars had crossed the line from difficult guests to something much darker. According to multiple former staff members and industry insiders, Letterman kept a mental list of celebrities who weren't just challenging to interview, but who displayed behavior so disturbing that it shocked even the cynical late-night host. These weren't simply demanding divas or nervous first-time guests. These were established stars whose actions behind the scenes revealed character flaws that went far beyond typical Hollywood ego. The most infamous example of a guest completely losing control happened on March 31, 1994, when Madonna appeared on The Late Show. What should have been a routine promotional appearance turned into what is still considered the most censored episode in American network television talk show history. The Queen of Pop, who was going through what she later called her rebellious period, arrived at the studio in an altered state that left production staff stunned. According to Daniel Kellison, a producer who worked on the show at the time, there had been a plan for Madonna's appearance. Letterman had been making jokes about her for months during his monologue, and the idea was that she would playfully confront him about it, showing clips of his comments and asking him to explain himself. It was supposed to be light-hearted revenge that would make for entertaining television. But something went wrong before Madonna even walked onto the stage. Kellison later revealed that Madonna had been smoking what she called endo before her appearance, which he clarified was essentially Oxycontin, not marijuana as many people assumed. The drugs, combined with Madonna's already confrontational personality, created a perfect storm of chaos. From the moment she sat down, Madonna was combative and uncontrollable. She brought a pair of her underwear with her and handed them to Letterman, then became annoyed when he wouldn't smell them on camera. "Wait a minute, aren't you going to smell them?" she demanded, later complaining to the audience, "I gave him my underpants and he won't smell them." But the underwear incident was just the beginning. Throughout the 20-minute interview, Madonna dropped the F word 14 times, a record that stood for years. She smoked cigars during the broadcast, made constant sexual innuendos, and turned every question into an opportunity for profanity or inappropriate commentary. When Letterman tried to steer the conversation towards safer topics, she became even more aggressive. "Why are you so obsessed with my sex life?" she snapped when he suggested she kiss an audience member. When he asked about her nose ring, she somehow made that sexual too, prompting an exasperated Letterman to exclaim, "What am I, speaking Chinese here?" "Stop it." The situation became so uncomfortable that the show's director was frantically trying to wrap the segment early. Members of the studio audience, including an elderly couple who were shown multiple times on camera, looked genuinely shocked and dismayed. At one point, a man in the audience shouted, "No!" when Madonna asked if they could just break the rules. According to staff members who were present that night, Letterman was visibly uncomfortable throughout the entire ordeal. As one producer later explained, Dave was immediately uncomfortable and unhappy. Dave always took to heart that he was hosting a show on the Tiffany network that would be going into homes across America. He did not want someone cursing uncontrollably on his show. The interview reached its peak of awkwardness when Madonna refused to leave the set at the scheduled time. When Letterman tried to go to a commercial, she did everything she could to prevent it. "I don't think that we should ever cut to a commercial," she declared. "Let's just keep talking and film every second of it." Letterman's response was dripping with sarcasm. "Oh yeah, because if the rest of it is as fascinating as the first part of it, we've got something there." Eventually, after multiple commercial breaks and 20 minutes of chaos, the production staff managed to get Madonna off the stage, but not before she had created television history for all the wrong reasons. The Federal Communications Commission received numerous complaints about the language used on the show, and critics said she had reached her lowest low. But Madonna's behavior that night wasn't just about drugs or rebellion. According to those who witnessed it, there was a calculated cruelty to her actions. She seemed to take pleasure in making Letterman uncomfortable and in shocking the audience. When she later sent Letterman a fax for his birthday, it read, "Happy fucking birthday, Dave. Glad you could get so much mileage out of the fucking show. Next time you need some fucking publicity, just give me a fucking call." The Madonna incident became a template for understanding what separated merely difficult guests from those who crossed into genuinely problematic territory. It wasn't just about being unpredictable or demanding. It was about using the platform to inflict discomfort on others, to push boundaries not for art or comedy, but seemingly for the pure satisfaction of watching others squirm. This pattern of behavior would repeat itself with other guests over the years, but Madonna's appearance remained the gold standard for how a celebrity could completely derail a television show through sheer force of will and pharmaceutical assistance. It showed that even someone as experienced as Letterman could be caught off guard by a guest who was determined to create chaos. The aftermath of the Madonna interview set the tone for how Letterman would handle similarly challenging guests in the future. He learned that sometimes the most famous and talented celebrities could also be the most destructive forces on television, and that his show needed better safeguards against guests who arrived with their own agenda that had nothing to do with entertainment. While Madonna's drug-fueled meltdown was shocking in its raw chaos, some of Letterman's most disturbing guest encounters came from performers who seemed to be in control of their faculties. These were method actors and performance artists who used the Late Show as their personal stage, often without letting anyone, including Letterman himself, know that they were putting on an elaborate act. The results were some of the most uncomfortable and genuinely frightening moments in late-night television history. The most notorious of these incidents occurred on July 28, 1987, when Crispin Glover appeared to promote his dark indie drama River's Edge. Glover, who had recently gained fame as George McFly in Back to the Future, seemed like the perfect guest for a lighthearted interview about his transition from blockbuster films to more serious dramatic work. Instead, he delivered what many consider the most bizarre and dangerous guest appearance in television history. From the moment Letterman introduced him, something was clearly wrong. Glover walked onto the stage wearing an outfit that looked like it had been assembled by someone having a nervous breakdown. Vertical stripped bell-bottom pants, a horizontal stripped polo shirt, thick platform shoes that added at least 6 inches to his height, oversized glasses, and a thick, tangled blonde wig that sat crooked on his head. He looked, as one observer later noted, like he was dragged from the waiting room and pushed out in front of the curtain. But Glover's appearance was nothing compared to his behavior once he sat down. He seemed jumpy and distracted, stuttering through disjointed sentences, and constantly fidgeting in his chair. "I'm having a very good summer," he mumbled awkwardly early in the interview, while squirming uncomfortably and looking around the studio as if he wasn't sure where he was. Things took a turn for the genuinely disturbing when Glover began pulling crumpled newspaper clippings from his pockets, frantically reading articles about himself while condemning the press for their coverage. "The press, they can do things. They can twist things around," he declared, his voice rising with what appeared to be genuine panic. He seemed to be having some kind of breakdown on live television. Letterman, who prided himself on being able to handle any guest, was clearly out of his depth. He kept trying to bring the conversation back to normal territory, but Glover was operating in his own reality. When Paul Schaefer was asked if he had anything to add, he quickly shook his head and mouthed no, clearly wanting no part of whatever was happening. "You seem to be distraught," Letterman observed, trying to find some way to connect with his obviously troubled guest. But instead of calming down, Glover became even more agitated. "People make me a lot weirder, and I'm strong, he insisted, suddenly jumping up from his chair and flexing his bicep. "I can arm wrestle. Do you arm wrestle? I can take you." What happened next became one of the most talked about moments in late-night television history. Glover, still standing and clearly agitated, suddenly announced, "I can kick!" Without warning, he executed a powerful karate kick with his massive platform shoe that stopped just inches from Letterman's face. The kick was so close that Letterman could feel the air displacement, and for a split second, it looked like America's favorite late-night host was about to be knocked unconscious on live television. Letterman, genuinely frightened by how close he had come to serious injury, immediately stood up and walked off the set. Okay, I'm going to check on the top 10, he said, trying to maintain some semblance of professionalism while clearly shaken by the near miss. As he left, Glover tried to grab his shoulder, but Letterman kept walking, leaving his guest alone on the stage as the show cut to commercial. When the show returned from break, Letterman was sitting alone on his set, and Glover was nowhere to be seen. "Well, he came very close to denting my head with those giant shoes," Letterman told the audience, adding later, "I think that's the first time that we've been doing this show that a guest actually tried to kick me." He referred to Glover as some goofball, some dork from wherever, and admitted that the incident had genuinely frightened him. "Vorty, I went to college. That is not how I want my life to end." The Glover incident sparked immediate speculation about what had really happened. Some thought the eccentric actor had suffered a genuine mental breakdown on live television. Others suspected he was on drugs. The mystery deepened when Glover returned to the show just a few weeks later, this time appearing completely normal and jovial, though he remained vague when asked about his previous behavior. The truth didn't emerge until 1991, when Glover starred in a surreal buddy comedy called Ruben and Ed. In the film, Glover played a strange, misunderstood character named Reuben Farr, who wore platform shoes and exhibited many of the same mannerisms he had displayed during his infamous Letterman appearance. There was even a scene where Reuben performed the exact same type of kick that had nearly taken Letterman's head off. It became clear that Glover had been performing in character during his 1987 appearance, essentially using Letterman's show as a testing ground for a role he was developing. What made this particularly disturbing wasn't just that he had put Letterman in physical danger, but that he had done so deliberately, as part of an elaborate performance art piece that no one else was aware of. When asked about the incident years later, Glover maintained his cryptic approach, telling interviewers, "I neither confirm nor deny that I was ever on the David Letterman show." This response, delivered with a knowing smile, only confirmed what many had suspected, that the whole thing had been an elaborate hoax designed to fool everyone, including Letterman himself. The Glover incident established a troubling precedent that would be repeated by other guests over the years. In 2009, Joaquin Phoenix appeared on the show, sporting a shaggy beard and sunglasses, claiming to be retiring from acting to pursue a hip-hop career. His behavior was erratic and his answers monosyllabic, leading many to believe he was having a genuine breakdown following his success in Walk the Line. Like Glover, Phoenix was actually performing as a character, this time for a mockumentary called I'm Still Here, and like Glover, he kept Letterman completely in the dark about the true nature of his appearance. Phoenix later returned to apologize, admitting that Letterman was not in on the joke, but the damage to the show's credibility had been done. Perhaps the most elaborate deception came in 1982, when comedian Andy Kaufman appeared alongside professional wrestler Jerry the King Lawler. During the interview, tensions escalated, until Lawler actually slapped Kaufman, who then threw his drink at the wrestler and stormed off the set using profanity. The incident made national headlines and seemed to prove that the boundary between entertainment and reality had completely broken down. Years later, it was revealed that the entire confrontation had been choreographed by Kaufman and Lawler to promote an upcoming wrestling match. Once again, Letterman had been used as an unwitting participant in someone else's performance art, his genuine confusion and concern serving as the backdrop for an elaborate hoax. What made these incidents particularly disturbing wasn't just that they fooled audiences, but that they put Letterman and his staff in genuine danger, both physical and professional. Glover's kick could have seriously injured the host, while the other hoaxes damaged the show's reputation for authenticity. These guests had crossed a line from difficult to genuinely malicious. using their celebrity status to manipulate and endanger others for their own artistic or promotional purposes. The pattern revealed something deeply troubling about how some performers viewed television appearances, not as opportunities to connect with audiences or promote their work, but as chances to experiment on unsuspecting hosts and viewers, treating them as unwitting participants in elaborate psychological experiments that served no purpose other than their own amusement or artistic ambition. While some guests used Letterman's show as a stage for elaborate performance art, others brought genuine hostility and confrontation that went far beyond entertainment. These were celebrities who arrived with personal agendas, political crusades, or altered mental states that turned what should have been light-hearted promotional appearances into uncomfortable battles of will. Unlike the method actors who were secretly performing, these guests were authentically difficult, bringing real-world conflicts and personal demons into the controlled environment of late-night television. The most explosive of these confrontations occurred on August 31, 1988, when comic book writer Harvey Pekar made what would become his final appearance on Late Night with David Letterman. Pekar, the creator of the autobiographical comic series American Splendor, had been a recurring guest since 1986. Initially brought on because one of Letterman's writers was a fan of his work, their early interactions had been contentious but entertaining, with Pekar playing the role of the cranky everyman who refused to be impressed by celebrity culture. But by 1988, the relationship between host and guest had soured considerably. NBC was in the middle of a writer's strike, and there were widespread accusations of corporate malfeasance being directed at General Electric, which owned the network. Pekar had appeared on a previous show wearing a t-shirt that boldly stated, "On strike against NBC," making his political position crystal clear. Letterman had managed to avoid discussing the strike during that appearance, but tensions were clearly building. When Pekar returned to the show that August night, he came prepared for battle. The interview began innocuously enough with small talk about Pekar's comic books and his life in Cleveland, but it quickly became apparent that Pekar had a different agenda. He wanted to talk about the strike, about corporate responsibility, and about what he saw as Letterman's complicity in NBC's anti-union activities. According to witnesses, the show that night had been particularly lackluster up to that point. The jokes had fallen flat, Letterman seemed grumpy and out of sorts, and the stupid human tricks segment had been more stupid than funny. Perhaps sensing weakness, Pekar decided to strike. During what should have been a routine discussion about his work, he suddenly shifted the conversation to politics and corporate corruption. You're always making these little cute remarks about GE, but there's a reason that people should be watching GE real closely that doesn't have anything to do with Robert Wright's toilet habits, Pekar said, referring to the NBC executive. And I want to tell you about that stuff. Number one, they're being sued in Ohio because they sold these nuclear reactors around the country. Letterman immediately tried to shut down the political discussion. Harvey, this is really bad manners. This is very, very inappropriate, he said, clearly uncomfortable with the direction the interview was taking. But Pekar was just getting started. He accused Letterman of being a corporate shill, of taking GE's money while pretending to criticize them in his monologue. The situation escalated quickly. Letterman, who prided himself on maintaining control of his show, found himself in an unprecedented situation. Here was a guest who was not only refusing to play by the rules of late-night television, but was actively attacking the host and the network on live television. "I just feel like this is not the forum for this kind of discussion," Letterman protested. "See, if you had your own talk show, you could talk about this stuff on your talk show." But Pekar wasn't backing down. He continued his attack, suggesting that Letterman had been corrupted by success and corporate money. What happened next was perhaps the most shocking moment in Letterman's entire career. Losing his famous composure for one of the few times on television, Letterman snapped. "No! You're a guest in my house, so shut the fuck up," he said, his voice rising with genuine anger. "You show up to my house and you sneeze in the hors d'oeuvres." The audience was stunned into silence. This wasn't the controlled, ironic Letterman we knew, but a genuinely angry host who had been pushed beyond his breaking point. The profanity was bleeped out for broadcast, but everyone in the studio had heard it clearly. Letterman, who had built his career on maintaining a cool, detached persona, had completely lost control. The confrontation continued through the commercial break, with both men arguing heatedly off camera. When they returned from the break, Letterman attempted to regain his composure. but the damage was done. He called Picard a dork and insulted his comic book, declaring that Picard would never be allowed back on the show. They cut to another commercial break, and when the show returned, Picard was gone. According to Picard's later account, Letterman leaned over during the commercial break and whispered, "You blew a good thing." But from Picard's perspective, he had accomplished exactly what he set out to do. He had exposed what he saw as the hypocrisy of late-night television, where hosts could make jokes about corporate power while being completely dependent on that same power for their careers. The Picard incident was significant because it revealed the limits of Letterman's famous confrontational style. While he was happy to make fun of guests and put them in uncomfortable situations, he was completely unprepared for someone who would turn the tables and attack him directly. The episode was so contentious that NBC restricted it immediately after broadcast, and it remained unavailable for years. Despite the ban, Picard did eventually return to Letterman's shows, appearing once more on Late Night in 1993 and on The Late Show in 1994, but these later appearances were tamer affairs, with both men seemingly having learned from their explosive confrontation. When Picard died in 2010, Letterman reflected that he had come to appreciate his former antagonist. "He was great. He would just go after stuff," Letterman said, admitting that retirement had given him a new perspective on Pecker's anti-establishment crusade. While the Picard incident stood out for its political intensity, other guests brought different types of disturbing behavior to the show. Farrah Fawcett's 1997 appearance became infamous for entirely different reasons. The former Charlie's Angels star arrived at the studio to promote a Playboy cover and pay-per-view special, but she seemed completely disconnected from reality. From the moment she sat down, Fawcett appeared distracted, harried, and incoherent. She fumbled through rambling stories, seemed confused about basic facts, and at one point stared at the fake backdrop behind Letterman's desk and exclaimed, "Wow," apparently thinking she was looking at the real New York City skyline. The interview became a catalog of disasters, with even the stage manager tripping during the broadcast as if Fawcett's confusion was somehow contagious. Everyone in the studio knew something was wrong, but Fawcett herself seemed oblivious to how badly the interview was going. She later claimed that her behavior had been a deliberate performance, an attempt to comment on the artificiality of talk show appearances. But as one observer noted, it sure didn't feel that way at the moment. The Fawcett appearance highlighted another category of problematic guest: celebrities who arrived at the studio in altered mental states, whether due to substances, medication, or psychological issues. These appearances were uncomfortable not because of deliberate hostility, but because they felt like watching someone have a breakdown in public. Paris Hilton's 2007 appearance fell into a similar category, though for different reasons. The hotel heiress appeared on the show just after completing a jail sentence for violating probation on a DUI charge. Letterman, never one to avoid uncomfortable topics, immediately focused on her recent incarceration. "How'd you like being in jail?" he asked within the first few seconds of the interview. "Not too much," Hilton replied awkwardly. The entire interview maintained this uncomfortable tone, with Letterman pressing her about prison food, her accommodations, and her fellow inmates. While technically not hostile in the same way as the Picard confrontation, the interview felt exploitative, like watching someone's public humiliation for entertainment. These incidents revealed a pattern in Letterman's approach to difficult guests. While he could be cruel and confrontational, he was often caught off guard when guests brought genuine personal or political issues to his show. His style worked best with celebrities who were willing to play along with the game of late-night television, but it fell apart when confronted with people who had their own agendas or were dealing with serious personal problems. The result was a series of interviews that pushed the boundaries of acceptable television, creating moments that were simultaneously compelling and deeply uncomfortable to watch. These weren't just difficult guests, they were people whose appearance on the show revealed the artificial nature of celebrity culture and the potential for exploitation that lurked beneath the surface of entertainment television. While Letterman spent decades cataloging the bad behavior of his celebrity guests, a closer examination of his own conduct reveals a disturbing pattern that raises questions about who was really the problem on The Late Show. Throughout his 33-year career, Letterman developed a reputation for making guests uncomfortable, particularly women, in ways that went far beyond his trademark sardonic humor. What emerged was a picture of a host who used his position of power to intimidate, embarrass, and sexually harass the very people who came on his show to promote their work. The pattern was so consistent that it became almost predictable. Female guests, especially younger ones, would find themselves subjected to inappropriate questions about their personal lives, unwanted physical contact, and comments about their appearance that had nothing to do with their professional accomplishments. Unlike the genuinely problematic guests who at least brought their issues from outside the studio, Letterman's inappropriate behavior was built into the very structure of his show. Jennifer Lopez experienced this firsthand during her appearance to promote The Wedding Planner. From the very beginning of the interview, Letterman made it clear that he was more interested in her body than her work. The camera crew, apparently following his direction, opened the segment with a close-up shot of Lopez's chest. She gasped in surprise and wagged her finger disappointedly at the camera, but the damage was done. Later in the same interview, Letterman showed photos from a Rolling Stones shoot and commented that the bikini top she was wearing was not necessarily your size, a remark that served no purpose other than to sexualize and embarrass his guest. Jessica Alba faced similar treatment when she appeared to promote her movie Honey. Alba had opened up about feeling vulnerable during dance scenes where she wore revealing costumes, describing how it was really hard because she felt nervous about being so exposed. Instead of showing empathy or moving to a different topic, Letterman pressed for more details about her outfit. How tiny was it? Where was it? He asked, clearly enjoying Alba's visible discomfort. The questioning continued despite her obvious reluctance to discuss the topic further. Perhaps no incident better illustrated Letterman's problematic behavior than his treatment of Jennifer Aniston during a 1998 appearance. Aniston, who was at the height of her friend's fame, had confessed that Letterman intimidated her. "I love you, but I fear you," she told him, a statement that should have prompted any decent host to reassure his guest and make her feel more comfortable. Instead, Letterman seemed to take it as permission to make her even more uncomfortable. The interview took a disturbing turn when they began discussing Aniston's fear of flying and her experiences at spas. Without warning, Letterman positioned himself behind Aniston's chair and leaned close to her hair. "I'm sorry if this is rude," he said, before putting a strand of her hair in his mouth. Aniston squealed in surprise and pulled away, clearly shocked by the unwanted contact. The audience laughed, but Aniston's discomfort was obvious to anyone watching. Letterman's obsession with how female guests smelled became another recurring theme that revealed his inappropriate fixation on women's bodies. He frequently commented on how wonderful female guests smelled, but his remarks to Taylor Swift in 2010 crossed into truly creepy territory. Swift, who was only 20 years old at the time, found herself being told by the 63-year-old host that she smelled like expensive wood. When Swift's face registered shock at the bizarre comment, Letterman didn't back down, but continued discussing the specifics of her supposed woody scent. The pattern extended beyond individual inappropriate moments to a systematic approach to interviewing women that focused on their personal lives, relationships, and sexuality rather than their professional accomplishments. This was particularly evident in his treatment of Janet Jackson after the 2004 Super Bowl incident, where her breast was briefly exposed during the halftime show. Jackson appeared on The Late Show specifically requesting not to discuss the incident, which she described as painful and embarrassing. She made it clear from the beginning that she didn't want to relive the moment. Letterman completely ignored her wishes. He spent most of the interview pressing her about whether the wardrobe malfunction was planned, despite her repeated denials. When she tried to redirect the conversation, he brought it back to the Super Bowl incident, treating her obvious distress as entertainment for his audience. The interview felt less like journalism and more like harassment, with Letterman using his position to force the discussion that his guest had explicitly said she didn't want to have. The irony of Letterman's behavior becomes even sharper when contrasted with guests like Harmony Korine, whose bizarre appearances genuinely challenged the format of late-night television. Korine, the young director behind controversial films like Kids and Gummo, appeared on the show multiple times in the 1990s, delivering halting stream of consciousness interviews that left Letterman visibly frustrated. During one memorable appearance, Korine's fumbling responses finally drove Letterman to break the fourth wall and address the audience directly. "You're just sitting there in your house, eating Cheetos. You think this is easy, don't you?" he said, his exasperation evident. But Korine's unusual interview style was nothing compared to what Letterman discovered about his behavior backstage. According to Letterman himself, Korine was eventually banned from the show after he was caught riffling through fellow guest Meryl Streep's purse backstage. The incident revealed a pattern of boundary violations that extended beyond his on-camera appearances. While Corinne's behavior was certainly inappropriate, it paled in comparison to Letterman's systematic harassment of female guests, which was not only tolerated but celebrated as part of his comedic persona. The contrast highlights a fundamental problem with how Letterman's show operated. While genuinely problematic behavior from guests like Corinne was eventually addressed with bans and consequences, Letterman's own inappropriate conduct was treated as entertainment. Female guests were expected to laugh off his comments, tolerate his unwanted touching, and play along with interviews that reduced them to sexual objects rather than treating them as the accomplished professionals they were. This double standard was particularly evident in how different types of bad behavior were received by audiences and critics. When male guests like Harvey Pekar or Crispin Glover created confrontational moments, they were often praised for their authenticity or artistic vision, even when their behavior put others at risk. When female guests tried to push back against Letterman's inappropriate treatment, they were often criticized for being difficult or humorless. The most disturbing aspect of Letterman's pattern of behavior wasn't just the individual incidents, but how they were normalized within the culture of late-night television. His treatment of women was so consistent and so public that it became part of his brand. Audiences tuned in partly to see which female guest would be made uncomfortable next, turning harassment into entertainment. Looking back at Letterman's career through this lens raises serious questions about the power dynamics in entertainment television and how they were exploited for decades. While he positioned himself as someone who could see through celebrity facades and call out problematic behavior, he was often the most problematic person in the room. His ability to make guests uncomfortable wasn't a sign of his journalistic integrity or comedic genius. It was evidence of how unchecked power can corrupt even seemingly harmless forms of entertainment. The real tragedy is how many talented women had their achievements overshadowed by their uncomfortable experiences on his show. Instead of celebrating their work or giving them a platform to connect with audiences, Letterman turned their appearances into exercises in humiliation and objectification. In doing so, he revealed that sometimes the most evil person on a talk show isn't the guest, but the host, who uses their position to prey on others while hiding behind the guise of entertainment. The legacy of these interviews serves as a reminder that the line between comedy and cruelty is often thinner than we'd like to admit, and that the real measure of a host's character isn't how they treat the powerful, but how they treat those who are vulnerable or simply trying to do their job in a professional manner.